thank you so much for being patient with us. It wouldn't be a good event without technical difficulties. I found that in my experience. So welcome to the 5th annual John Courtney Murray Forum. The John Courtney Murray Forum historically is I call it a conference light, a little evening where we get together and share our feelings and conversations and intellectual pursuits about either theme. So this year's theme is Seeking the Whole, Living and Exploring Our Catholic Identity. So what does that mean? We are all Catholic, for those that do identify in the room, and there is something that draws us all together. But we are all created as individuals, and we all have those different identities that we hold and explore every day. So we're going to commence our night of exploration and introspection with Joe Larauze.
Hello, how are you all?
Hey Joe.
So I'm Joe Larauze. I'm economics and English double major here at Loyola. I'm in my junior year. I'm also minoring in Catholic Studies, which is a pretty great minor. If you've been thinking about it, you should definitely go into it. But this tonight I'm going to be presenting about what I call identities in tandem. And so, as Alexis was saying, this forum is called Seeking the Whole, and what does that mean? It means that we have all these. It's recognizing the omnipresence of our Catholic faith in all of our lives and in all of our different individualities and in all of our different experiences. We find this common thread in our Catholicism. So let's see if this clicker works. All right, so. Yeah, so we are all characterized by the different experiences that we have in relation to our faith. For some of us, it may be in relation to the arts, it may be in relation to the place that they came from, the experiences that they had in their life, and each one of us has a piece of this puzzle that when we build it together, it forms this Catholic heritage and this universal Catholic Church. But tonight you're going to be hearing a lot of different presentations and about different ways in which our lovely peers here and fellow Catholic Studies minors, for myself, experience their faith and go through their faith. And so they're going to be talking about a specific way in which they approach that. But we have to remember that though we have different perspectives, we're not just defined by one perspective. We're multi-dimensional individuals. So we're made up of a multiplicity of experiences, and just like the church, which is made up of us, the multiplicity of individuals and experiences. So after that, I'm going to start us off with a quote by a French. Oh, this is not the quote. All right. Well, I'm going to start us off with a quote, which is not here, but is by a French American writer called Julian Green, and whose writing was very influenced by his own multiplicity of identities. And so he's French and American, Catholic. He went back and forth between Catholicism and Protestantism, and he also is homosexual. So all these things played into his Catholic faith. And so he said about this idea of us being multidimensional, each of us is several, all by ourselves. Each of us is many. Each of us is a proliferation of selves. There are people of many different kinds in the vast colony of our being who all think and feel differently. So my focus tonight, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about my Catholic heritage, my being brought up in the Catholic faith, and to show you some of these different identities that come into play, that have come into play in my experience, and the ways in which they've interacted. And the title of my presentation is Catholic Identities in Tandem, which means that they're working together and working alongside each other. So it's their interaction that's important, and you're going to see that the different presentations that we have tonight are all speaking about different identities that are going to interact with each other. But keep in mind that sometimes they don't interact with each other that well. Sometimes they're a little bit in conflict. So, and I have another quote here, which is from The Sympathizer, which is a novel by Viet Thanh Nguyen. who's a Vietnamese writer, and this is not really related to like Catholicism, but this is a book I've been reading in one of my English classes, and it spoke to me a lot because it's about the novel follows a double agent, Vietnamese American double agent, who is working for the North Vietnamese communists and sort of undercover with the South Vietnamese who have been kicked out of Vietnam into the U.S. And so, just to be clear, I'm not a double agent or anything like that, but I did really identify with this book and with this character because throughout the novel he struggles so much with these different identities of being Vietnamese and being American and being like partly communist and being other stuff. But and so there's this quote where he's speaking to a professor, and the professor is telling him, "Here you can learn how to not be torn apart by your opposing sides, but rather to balance them and to benefit from both." So this is kind of my goal as we progress through this presentation, is to kind of see how we can balance these identities. So that was a really long introduction, but without further ado, you guys may know that I am both French and American. People call me French Joe. It's not because I'm Italian. So yes, there's a reason for that. Some people call me French, kind of you. And some people call me just French because they just really want to annoy me. But so a little quick history lesson about France and the Catholic Church. France really became really linked to the Catholic Church starting in 497 AD, when one of the first Frankish kings, Clovis, became baptized. He had this whole thing where he was fighting this enemy army, and he'd been told, like, you should subscribe to the Catholic faith, and he was like, nah. But while he was fighting this battle, he was losing, and so he went, you know what, God, if there's a God, if you help me win this battle, I will convert. And, naturally, he won the battle, and he converted. And from then on, Catholicism became the state religion in France. And so from the beginning, Catholicism was very linked to monarchy and to nobility, which is probably why it lost popularity during the French Revolution when the monarchy was overthrown and the church was kind of pushed aside. And then eventually in 1905, France was officially secularized, so it became the church and the state became completely separate, as it is still today, even though we still have a pretty big proportion of practicing Catholics. So, let's see, where we go. So first, I'm a French Catholic, and that's been incredibly important to my faith, and being raised in France. My dad is kind of has been my spiritual mentor, and he's the one who's kind of helped me grow through my faith. And beyond him, I've been very touched by my 10 years that I've spent in France, because that is where I feel like I've had my spiritual awakening. So some of you guys may know of Taizé, represented here. Some of you have probably been at our wonderful Wednesday night Taizé service. Some of you guys have probably been to the actual village of Taizé in France. And it so happens that one of my first experiences of faith, of communion with God, was at the original Taizé. So I remember being there and feeling this thing welling up inside myself, this heat. And so that's something that's really informed me, and so this is why France will always be significant to me in my faith. Next, we have praise. So this is another place, another sort of village in France that is very that has been marked by the Catholic faith. I first learned how to pray and how to praise in this town called Paris-le-Monial, which is in the center of France, and which is famous for having had apparitions of Jesus to this woman called Marguerite Marie Alacoque. And so around these apparitions was built this sort of huge retreat center where thousands of Catholics come yearly to celebrate their common faith and praise together and have all these activities related to their Catholic faith. So one of my first experiences in praise and in prayer was, I'm going to paint you a picture. It was in this huge tent that's the size of Gentile Arena, and in which probably 5,000 other people were there, and were singing together, and were raising their hands, and we're all in communion. And this was a really, really significant moment to me, sort of going forward in my faith. And there was this sense of reverence and this sense of spontaneity in prayer, that you just feel something welling up inside of you and then you would go with it. And this has informed a lot of the way in which I pray. I like to think of myself as a spontaneous prayer, and a lot of the experiences I've had have been marked by spontaneity. Namely, a lot of the Catholic priests I've met in France, they have this characteristic, this thing that always impressed me so much related to other priests that I've met, is that every time I would meet with a priest, be it for spiritual direction or catechesis or whatever else, they would always start our time together saying the words "On prie," which were translated by Dr. Murphy earlier when he said, "Shall we pray?" And so, whatever our meeting was for, we would just pray together, bless the time that we were about to spend together, and then go on with our meeting or whatever we were about to do. And so this has been really, really, really wonderful, because it has brought this sense of reverence into my Catholic life. And then, okay. So, lastly, I think that France, one of the most important things about how France has informed my faith is through the fact that I developed a personal faith in France, that it was a relationship between me and God. And though many of the experiences of faith that I've had have been in these crowded areas like the Thésée and the Tandem, where there were thousands of people around me, it was characterized by just something that was deeply personal and deeply interior. And one way that describes it best is in the words of Jesus during one of his apparitions to Marguerite Marie Lacoque, in which he said, "Mon divin cœur est passionné d'amour pour les hommes et pour toi en particulier." And this means, my divine heart is passionate with love for all mankind and for you in particular. So this has narrated my faith in France, during my time in France, is this idea of, I see you, and you are important to me. So, yeah, that is my French Catholic faith. And so then, I experienced a really, really big shift when I came here. After 10 years in France, I was thrilled to be in the US, because I was away from the pessimistic, obnoxious French. It's raining in Paris all the time, so it's just great to be here, and great to be in the spirit of American optimism, of can-do-ism. And though I had this spiritual awakening in France, it's only when I came to the US, and Loyola in particular, that I felt a sense of ownership of my faith. That I could say, this is something that I wish to continue personally. And this is one thing where I love Loyola, is that I feel like Loyola has offered me so many opportunities to continue my faith, to grow in my faith by myself. I can go to Mass every day of the week if I want to, and I can go to Thésée, and I can go to Adoration, and I can do all these things. And so the only person who can determine whether my faith is worth pursuing or not is me. And as you might be able to see from me standing in front of you right now, I found out that it was very worth pursuing. So the sense of ownership, also the sense of community, because as I was saying, in France I felt my faith being more personal in a one-to-one relationship. And because France is mostly secularized, a lot of the schools there are completely secularized, and there are pretty few Catholic schools there, I'd say. And in general, it's discouraged to show signs of being religious, of practicing faith in schools in France. And so that was something that was hard for me, because even though at home I practiced my faith quite intensely, at school I had nobody who I could look to, I had no close friends who really shared my faith values. So coming here, you can imagine it was quite a shock and quite a joy to realize that so many people shared my beliefs, shared my faith, or at the very least, if they didn't share my faith, they respected it. And they were willing to listen to it, and they were willing to engage with me about their own experiences. And so, and a lot of the people in this room have been a great part of that. Have been a part of this sense of community. And oh, there's some familiar faces in this picture. There we go. And then, lastly, one thing that was very foundational and very novel in my faith in the U.S. is that it brought in this idea of universal and comprehensive and geared towards everyone, every experience and every person. There we go. So being that Catholicism in France was very close to the kings and the monarchy and bourgeoisie and all of this, there was a certain tendency that it have to stay to keep a kind of traditional outlook, and that in France, the way of interpreting the Bible, the way of interpreting the Word of God, the way of interpreting all these things was very strict and didn't really stray from these notions of who was accepted in the church. So an example is that in France, through my growth through faith, I was taught that only a man and a woman should be allowed to love each other. And so that is something that I felt very strongly because I was brought up with it, and then it became something that informed my personality, informed my faith, and it was something that I felt very strongly. But coming to the US, it was an idea that was challenged, or where people said, okay, well let's talk about this. Let's kind of expand this notion. And so in that sense, and in many other senses, I was able to kind of come to an awareness of the universality of the faith, and of its inclusiveness of everyone and everything. Well, I'm just kidding. There we go. So this universality that is inherent to Catholicism, and here I'm going to best explain this universality, I'm going to defer to Pope Francis. Hi, Pope Francis. Who said in his apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, the salvation which God has wrought and the Church joyfully proclaims is for everyone. God has found a way to unite himself to every human being in every age. He has chosen to call them together as a people and not as isolated individuals. No one is saved by himself or herself individually or by his or her own efforts. God attracts us by taking into account the complex interweaving of personal relationships entailed in the life of a human community. The people which God has chosen and called is the church. So, as I've kind of explained, I've benefited immensely from these two very different aspects of my growth as a Catholic, both from the French perspective and from the American perspective. And with these two, there have been different ideas that have come up, and sometimes they've been together, but a lot of the time I've been tempted to see these different ideas, the personal versus the communal, the traditional versus the non-traditional, to be ideas that were in tension, and that were things that I had to kind of go back and forth between, and try to resolve, and try to think, well, if I'm in a community of faith and I'm spending all these times with friends in prayer, then maybe I need to make sure that I'm also taking care of my personal faith, because maybe the community is not giving me what being alone in prayer would give me. I don't know if that makes sense. But so there's been a temptation to sort of try and resolve this tension. But what's important to remember is that all these things don't have to be in tension, they can be related. And, oh, that's not what it was. Okay, well, that didn't work out. What was going to happen if this thing had worked, here, I'm going to like go up and do it for you. There would have been a line that would have appeared here, which would make, what is this?
A cross.
Cross! Great! My gosh, what a crowd. And so we look to the cross of balancing all these ideas, and if this doesn't make sense, I'm going to try and make sense of it now, but in the Summa Theologia, Thomas Aquinas says of the cross that it is befitting the universal salvation of the entire world. The shape of the cross extending out into four extremes from their central point of contact denotes the power and providence diffused everywhere of him who hung upon it. And he also says that that upon the cross, speaking of Jesus Christ, he dies with outstretched hands in order to draw with one hand the people of old, and with the other, the new. So this is the idea of this importance of the balance between these ideas, and that they don't need to be in tension, but that it's important to go back and forth and see them as all being pieces of this universal Catholic Church. So, as a conclusion, I know Father Murphy, Dr. Murphy, Doctor. I know that you sort of started this up with prayer, but in the spirit of my French Catholic upbringing, I'd like to lead you all in another prayer, maybe one that will help guide the rest of this evening. So I'd invite you to close your eyes or to make yourself comfortable. Seigneur, Lord, thank you so much for bringing us all together here tonight. You once said that if two or more of you are gathered in my name, I am among you. We believe that you are with us tonight, and we thank you for this opportunity to speak about the many different identities that make up your church, your universal church. We ask you to help us acknowledge and identify the different identities that link us to you in our lives, and to be able to engage them and dialogue with them and pray to you. We pray all this in your name. Amen.